The last government continued to borrow money even when we're in a boom period. So that can't be right. So it wasn't exactly being fiscally tight then.
Okay,
so.
and on the point that the questioner made of a wide public consultation, do you think it's a good idea?
I do think it's a good idea, although how you're going to implement it is going to be a little bit difficult. You can't exactly ask 56 million people their individual opinions.
Jeremy Hunt, how do you deal with it?
Well, I think the point is that we don't think that we have all the answers, and it may be that there are people who are users of public services at the very bottom of the pyramid, people on the benefit system who can tell us where the money is needed and where it's being wasted. And the whole purpose of this approach is to try and minimise the impact on the people who are most dependent on critical public services.
Actually, the very
That's why we want to do...
will happen. It's the least well-off in our society who will bear the pain of the deficit which they did not help create. Okay. And can I also say, actually, you are forcing people to become dependent on the state. We are going to see our social welfare budget bloom when you see all these people lose their jobs, whether it's public sector jobs, and once you lose public sector jobs, the private sector also loses jobs. I'm a councillor in Birmingham. Now that the Building Schools for the Future programme is being slashed, private construction firms will lose those contracts. They will not have jobs because we have a recession. There's no alternative demand. Right. Actually, stimulating the economy, investing, and may I make the point also?
I think you've made enough points. No, it may be important. I think you've made 2 points enough. I haven't had Toby Young yet, and I want to hear him, and I'll come back to you later.
I would like to finish that point after you've made that, please.
Salma, you're talking as if you already know the contents of the emergency budget. You know exactly where the cuts are going to fall. And it's not true either that the entire burden of cutting the deficit is going to fall on the least well-off. The government have actually said, in addition to a pupil premium, they're going to reduce taxes for low-income earners. And actually, it's also going to fall on high-income earners too. The government have said they're not going to cut the highest rate of tax at 50%. They're not going to introduce an inheritance cut. They're going to increase capital gains tax. I think that consulting the public about where the cuts should fall is a good idea, but I think they should go further and also consult the public about where the taxes should come to.
The woman in pink there in the middle.
George Osborne says that he wants to take us through this pain together, but the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development said yesterday that the cuts are going to hit people in the north the hardest and the most economically and socially deprived people in this country. So he's talking complete rubbish. George Osborne won't suffer when local swimming pools and libraries close down because he'll just go to his private health club, and I'm sure he's got his own library of his own.
Jeremy Hunt, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the first thing that I did when I became Culture Secretary was cancel chauffeur-driven cars for the ministers in my department, which Ben and his team enjoyed, which cost £250,000 a year. One of the first things that David Cameron did was cut ministerial pay by 5%. And we are absolutely saying that we're all in this together. And I have to say to Salma that the most dangerous thing for the most vulnerable people in society is to lose control of the national finances, because the national finances are what fund the vital public services that they all depend on. And what we can do if we really want to protect them is to make sure that we take the difficult decisions now before it gets much, much worse. And what I also say to Ben is, look at what we've actually done. You said that we were going to cut Sure Start. We didn't. You said we were going to cut the schools budget. We didn't. You said that we were going to cut the 16 to 19 budget. We didn't. Everything we have done has been exactly as Toby says. We have been trying really hard to make sure we protect vital public services to deal with the problem that we've inherited and that we urgently need to sort out.
Ben Bradshaw. Well, the future... You were going to make cuts, weren't you, anyway? I mean, how are you second-guessing the cuts that are going to be made or haven't yet been announced?
Well, we have to wait and see, but I think Salma said something really, really important. The critical issue here, we all accept that the deficit has got to be reduced. The critical issue here is what is the balance between tax increases and spending cuts? What the coalition appears to want to do now is to have tax increases at 1 and spending cuts at 4 in terms of a ratio. What the Liberal Democrats, of course, said before the election was they wanted 2.5 to 1, so that's a huge gap. Now, how is that gap going to be narrowed? Our argument will be that there should be a much more balanced package to protect the vulnerable, to protect our vital public services, and to make sure that those with the broadest shoulders carry the heaviest burden.
I'm sorry, I just can't accept Ben saying this, because his government left £50 billion of unallocated spending cuts at the time of the last election. And I think, Ben, for you to engage in this debate, rather than just criticising the cuts, you've actually got to say what you would do instead. Otherwise, it's just carping from the sidelines about a problem that you actually created.
I come to the woman in the second row there, with the spectacles on, yes. That's you.
No spectacles.
You haven't got spectacles, all right. It's still you. No, you have. Go on.
Surely it's the right thing in a democratic society to ask the people what they think, but surely, all credit to the government that we now have, they're also looking to a good model that's worked, i.e. Canada, to see what they're suggesting.
OK. And the man in red up there on the right. You, sir.
It is all well and good just emphasising the need for cuts, cuts, cuts. What is the point of making cuts when a lot of people will be put out of work? As much, if not more, emphasis has got to be put on economic growth.
Yes.
We need more jobs, more wealth creation. That will do a lot more for this society in this country than just making cuts.
Right.
More emphasis on that, please.
OK. Just before we leave this topic, a question from George Coyley, could we have, please? Mr Coyley.
What advice did Lady Thatcher give to the Prime Minister during her visit to Number 10 earlier this week?
What advice do you think Lady Thatcher